Alright everybody, I need your help. If you just saw my most recent video, I've created a theory-crafted build for Bloodlance, walking into Season 2, taking into account all the changes to Overpower buckets, how our damage works with different damage buckets, how Overpower itself is going to be calculated, the additive damage bonuses that you're going to get from your base life and your Fortify and how that's different than it was before, and I think we came up with a really strong Bloodlance build. And people were then asking me about Blood Surge. I think Blood Surge is dead. Here's an interesting thing about Blood Surge and why it's so much different. It mostly deals with how they've changed blood builds to be hyper-focused on blood orbs, both with their ability to heal and most notably the changes to Rathma's Vigor. It no longer gives you that maximum life of 10%, but what it does say is that if a blood orb, the little special mechanic for a Necromancer that are spawned from Corpse Tendrils, the Embalmer aspect, the new Transfusion change to the passive skill, as well as from Bloodlance, if you're able to heal for your base life, it's going to reduce this timer by 2 seconds, meaning you're going to cheat out more overpowers than you did previously. Now, why would that be so bad? You have all of the same mechanisms of being able to generate blood orbs as you do on a Bloodlance build. The aspect Gore Quills was introduced in Season 1, and the reason why this thing is so powerful and used over its theoretically stronger counterpart of Hungry Blood is the fact that it consumes blood orbs for you, which triggers everything that consuming a blood orb triggers. Proccing this new Rathma's Vigor, healing you, overhealing you for the purposes of generating barrier with Temerity, anything that says that blood orbs increase your damage over an amount of time, the Blood Begets Blood legendary node, the fact that you could fortify off of blood nodes from Blood Drinker. Being able to cast Bloodlance and have the blood orbs scattered around the battlefield consumed for you changed the game for blood builds, most notably Bloodlance. Here's the problem. Blood Surge doesn't do that. Blood Surge's key aspect says that the Nova that goes off triggers a second time, doing reduced damage. So you don't have a way of easily picking up these blood orbs. There's a second problem with Blood Surge that you might not immediately see just based off how the wording is here, but it's a close melee range build. While the first drain hits the entirety of the screen, the Nova occurs over a very small radius around your character, meaning you need to be in melee range for that Nova to hit. And since that Nova is the only thing that really does damage, you need to be really close to targets. Now, why is that such a problem? Well, one, if your overpowered damage, while significantly changed from before, is based off of how much of your current life you have and how much of your Fortify that you have, being in melee range means you're in danger and you're taking damage a ton of the time, reducing your total bonus to overpower. On top of that, Blood Surge's essence cost is so high that you need to spend a lot of time managing your resources by hemorrhaging, as well as running around and picking up blood orbs if you are using potent blood. But whereas Gore Quills says I cast Bloodlance and pick up everything for me, also gaining me essence effectively for free, Blood Surge needs to run around the battlefield. And every moment that you're running around to pick up these blood orbs to get all the benefits that Bloodlance is basically getting for free and automated, you're not doing damage, you're not crowd controlling monsters, and you're taking more damage. So all in all, Blood Surge right now is like this weird clunky cousin of Bloodlance, which has been so overtuned in comparison that I think Blood Surge is effectively dead. Now, I'm not the only person thinking about this. I'm sitting here with chat and theory crafting for the past 6 hours on how to make overpower builds really functional in Season 2. And when we stopped to think about Blood Surge, somebody asked, is it basically the same build, but you just swap the skill points over? My first thought was, yeah, of course, it's basically that. And then you stop to think about the fact that, wait a minute, how am I going to pick up the blood orbs? In fact, how am I even going to generate as many blood orbs as I did previously, since Blood Surge doesn't create blood orbs? Well, if we look at Transfusion, that at least fixes a little bit of the problem for us, which is that it's now a lucky hit chance to generate a blood orb, and it's doubled against bosses. The problem being that it can only occur once every 4 seconds. And did you see the lucky hit chance on Blood Surge itself? Blood Surge has a whopping 12% native lucky hit chance. While Bloodlance only has a 33% chance, it's not crazy stronger as in comparison to something like Bone Spear that has 50%, etc. 12% chance to proc a 9% chance effectively doesn't happen, even if you hit every single target on the screen. Bloodlance is nearly triple that base chance of happening, and on top of that, just naturally generates blood orbs. So we're getting less of them. We can't automatically pick them up. We are more likely to get killed in combat, or at least take a significant amount of damage, which reduces our outgoing overpower damage. And there's kind of nothing to bridge this gap. In fact, I even went so far as to think, well, wait a minute, if I drop Blood Mist, because in Season 2 you don't technically need Blood Mist, you can actually run Metamorphosis as one of your vampire powers, which gains you Unstoppable, so we don't technically need Blood Mist. That frees up enough points for me to at least pick up Blood Lance, put it on my skill bar, and then I could run Gore Quills just as a throwaway aspect, and then part of my essence generation cycle would be to walk up, blow all of my essence with Blood Surge, hemorrhage a few times, generate some blood orbs, then use Gore Quills on my Blood Lance to automatically pick up the orbs, and you see how clunky this gets when I could just be a Blood Lance build. Not only that, the question becomes, where would you fit the aspect? I think Blood Surge would almost certainly have to use a one-hander and an offhand, which is just strictly weaker than using the two-handed version of it. You do gain access to a couple cool stats that you couldn't otherwise without using a focus, but if you're using an offhand on a Blood Necromancer, you'd much rather it be a shield to get maximum life to further increase all of the great stats that synergize off of your max life and fortify. So you'd have to lose the power of a double strength aspect. You'd have to run an inferior offhand, just be able to then use Blood Lance as a pseudo essence gen, pseudo automation for the blood orbs, to then spam through a skill which costs double what Blood Lance costs and deals less damage for the small uptick of being able to hit more targets per cast than Blood Lance does to start. I can't think of a way to really make it good. In fact, I think what I just described is the best version of this build that I could come up with, where Blood Surge is really just a worse version of Blood Lance that still needs to rely on Blood Lance to do anything with Blood Surge. I actually almost even went so far as to consider making it a shadow build so that you could actually just ramp its damage via multipliers instead of having to worry about overpower, and then build it as like crit and vuln. Blood skills really don't get a lot of crit. Now that being said, with Grasping Veins and Bone Storm and building into crit in our Paragon board, it wouldn't be super awful. We'd probably get somewhere around like 60 to 70% chance to crit, but at that point I would almost even rather just do that with Blood Lance, which is easier to play off of doing the additional crit damage than Blood Surge, since the base damage of Blood Surge is so much lower. So I need you to help me theorycraft here. Do you think that you can come up with a really effective overpower Blood Surge build that I'm just missing here? And I don't mean just kind of suffering through the fact that Blood Surge is pretty bad. I mean legitimately benefiting from all of the changes, as well as mitigating some of the damage loss that we're experiencing in Season 2 kind of across the board, and actually make this skill work. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. Show me a planner, even just list the aspects and how you kind of think they're going to interact. If you've been interested in a Blood Surge build, I promise I'm going to build it to the best of my ability, but this is kind of my forewarning. Unless something is really drastically different in Season 2 that I don't currently have information about, or we just don't fully understand as far as the changes go, Blood Surge is probably going to drop pretty far down the list. It's funny, they made Overpower almost strictly better in every way, shape, or form, but the fact that they've tailored it so much into this Blood Orb Rathma's Vigor constant overpowering proc version of it basically means that Blood Surge is coming out as a clunkier and worse build than it was even in Season 1, where it really didn't have access to all the things that Season 2 is bringing to it. That being said, it's still going to be very good for leveling, where you don't really need to worry about all this min-maxing potential in the late game. It's super powerful in the early game because it says it hits the entire screen and scales decently well. So once we get into the end game, where it's really just not going to be able to compare to any of the other builds, especially like Shadow Dot builds, which are up on the rise, and even the nerfed Bone Spear is probably going to drastically outperform this build, kind of regardless of how you build it. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that helped to contextualize at least some of the theory crafting issues that I'm running into right now. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.